He's been active as a demonstrator and workshop leader for turning clubs, as well as art craft schools. For instance, Aramont School of Arts in Tennessee, the Appalachian Center for Craft in Tennessee, Peters Valley Craft Center in New Jersey, that's the one I usually go to, and John C. Campbell Folk School in North Carolina. And he also finds satisfaction in teaching wood turning courses for a local college. And his work has been shown in many venues and in private collections. Here's Mark.
I didn't recognize any of that. I don't know. It sounded decent. Good evening, DelVal Turners. You're as bad as my first class, day one in August. Upset because they don't have Labor Day off. Let's try this. Good morning.
Evening.
Morning.
Good evening.
Evening. Good night.
Short attention span.
I'd say. It is good to be here this evening with you all. I talked to Marty just a few minutes before things got started, find out about the format for this evening's meeting, what you all usually do. And I've never heard of this from a group, but he says you take 4 breaks within the meeting, but we have to be out of here by 11 p.m. You know, so I usually don't do things that way. A short demonstration like this could take anywhere from a half hour to 2 hours. And I want to say we're going to shoot towards being done just a few minutes before 9. Is that okay with you all?
Yes.
And without a break. Unless I start turning 3 shades of gray up here and need a break. This evening, I'm going to go over all the steps with you on making a rockabye box. I guess I'm nowhere near the camera, am I? Yep. All the steps to make a rockabye box. Now, actually, I'm using the same piece of wood as what I have in my hand for tonight's demonstration. This is a piece of Norwegian maple burl. Also, it's got quite a bit of spalting and some voids in it. It should make a pretty decent box, unless something goes wrong. And on this here, and all the boxes that are up there, except for the little miniature ones, they have loose fitting lids. So if you pick them up to look at them, don't dump it over without holding that lid. That finial is fragile. They're loose fitting for a reason. And that is the namesake of this box, rockabye box. When completed, I'm sure you're not going to be able to hear it, but I can. It's tick-tock, tick-tock. The name actually came after the box was designed. So it's a soothing little box and a gentle rocking box. So I'll go through all the steps. Has anybody seen me do this before? Okay. Please tell me if I'm doing it right.
I will try, yes.
Okay, you got some help over there. He's going to help with that too. But I'd appreciate it if you tell me right before I make the mistake.
Okay.
All right? That makes me look good. If you have questions on anything that I'm doing, I welcome them. Just speak up loud enough so I can hear the question and everybody can hear the question. And I'll do the best I can to answer it and keep going as I'm answering it. There's a lot of steps to this, and I don't think we'll be pushing it tonight, but there's a lot to keep us busy until, let's say, 10 to 9, something like that. Safety first, the beard does get covered up. Checking out the lathe while I had a few minutes, just ran a little bit of WD-40 over the bed just to smooth it up. There's still a little squeak there, I apologize for that. And we'll try to keep that down to a minimum. I wanted to check the belt on here for speeds. I like to turn these small projects at very high speeds. I guess that's why they have this up there. But hopefully I'm not going to be using that this evening. I know the real reason they did that is if it does come off, it bounces right back at me, and I can grab it real quick and put it right back on the lathe and get back to work. Okay. In order to do this box, I need to make up 3 jigs fairly quickly. One jig is going to be a collet chuck, and we're going to be using this for turning the lid, part of the lid. So I'm going to rough that in. Also, I'm going to need to make a jam chuck so that when we hollow this box out, we can reverse turn the bottom. Does anybody here use jam chucks? Great, great, great tools. And the last jig we're going to make up is an eccentric chuck. This has 2 tendons on it, and I'll go over that as I do it. One is dead center, one is off center. And this is so that we can place our finial in it at the very end and turn part of it eccentric, part of it on center. So those are the jigs, and I start with those before we even get started on the box. One thing, I make sure the speed is down on the lathe before I start it. And the 3 pieces I need for those jigs are right here. I have the centers marked on the jam chuck, just one side. Collet chuck, just one side. And the eccentric chuck, both sides. And I didn't miss here. I have a second center, which is going to be an 1/8 inch off center. And that's for the finial.
Hey Mark, do you need that light right above it? Because it's blocking the view of the camera.
How's that?
Great, thank you.
Great.
Where are my pieces? So I'm just going to use my punch and mark all the centers. We'll get to that one last. Okay. I'm going to bring this up right against the spindle face. I'm not going to use the drive on this. Most of the time it stays on the lathe. Okay. I do try to practice safety when I'm doing demonstrations and also at home. So I want to make sure that that doesn't touch the tool rest. I always spin it by hand. Next, the tool rest height, at least to me, is very important. When I have a tool, 95% of the time, if I lay that tool on the tool rest and the handle and tool are parallel to the lathe bed, I want my cutting tip to be on the center axis. So right now, I'm about 1/4 inch low. And I just want you to know ahead of time, that thumping noise is not my tool use. All right, we're all set. Lathe is
Should we
on.
move the lathe down so the screen has some effect? Can we do that?
He's worried about his wife.
Sure.
She's in the line of fire.
Will that bother you? Thank you. Here.
Thank you, dear.
Now,
Thank you.
That's sweet of him.
trust me, I'm just kidding around. The piece is not going anywhere. His last words, right?
Wow.
Hey, I'm going to use the ABCs tonight. A is for anchoring the tool to the tool rest. Always keep it anchored. 2, I'm going to ride the bevel, just like so. Then I'm going to lift the tool and I'm going to cut. And that's the ABCs of wood turning. Now, I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Yeah. my index finger is up against the tool rest, and I can only let the tool out so far. Now it looks round. There's three ways I can check. I can lay the tool on the shaft. If it bounces, I know it's not round. Or I can put my thumb on it in this direction, or we can shut the lathe off and take a look at it. So, A for anchor, B for bevel, lift to cut. Once it starts cutting, I stop lifting, and I just follow through. If I want a nice, clean, straight cut through there, I grip onto the tool, my index finger's up against the tool rest, and I just follow through with the cut, and I get a nice cylinder there. That's part of the job. The only thing we have left to do to that is put a tenon on there so we can hold it with our chuck later. Just breaking off the sharp edges. We're going to do the same exact thing for the collet chuck. Again, we're not going to use these till later on, but it's nice to get them out of the way before I even start the box.
What was that first one called?
That's going to be my jam chuck, so that I can reverse turn the box after we hollow it. Now, if by chance any of you are taking notes, I would suggest that you do not. Are you taking notes?
No.
Okay. I don't know what made me think of that. And the reason for that is, if you go to my website, on the left-hand toolbar, go down to articles, all the steps for this box are on there. So you can just enjoy watching it being made and watching the tooling instead of trying to get down the little tips on there. Or if you really want to take notes, go ahead and take notes. It's up to you. Back to the rough and gouge. Same thing, turn it into a cylinder, and then go ahead and put a tenon on one end. See how quick they are? Now when I make this box this evening, I'm making all three of the chucks. If I go to make a second box later on tonight or next week, I don't have to make these chucks up over again. I can use these over and over. As long as I don't get the hole too big for the lid. But I don't throw anything away. It goes in a box and I'll go back and use it later. Okay, so that's it for those two. This next one is a little more involved, making the eccentric chuck. There's a very good reason for making this up. I was doing a demonstration down in Georgia, and this was going back many, many years. And it was an all-day demonstration. And I thought things were going pretty well. Till after lunch, somebody raised their hand. And when they do that, I usually, yes. Yeah, what's up? And the guy said, well, let me back up just a minute. I was doing a demonstration on eccentric turning. I like off-center work a lot. The guy asked me how much the chuck cost that I was using. And I couldn't lie to him. I told him it was like $300. Well, that kind of changed the whole mode of the people watching. I can hear the grumble in the undertow. Oh, I'm going to spend no $300 on a chuck. I'm not going to do that. I have never taken that chuck out again for another demonstration because I didn't want that to happen. This one here cost about a nickel maybe. That goes over much better. Now this one I'm only throwing an 1/8 inch off center, but you can throw it off as much as you want depending on what you want to do. For what I'm doing here this evening, quarter or 1/8 inches as much as I can go for this little tiny finial. Okay, again, I grab onto that hand wheel. I don't want that spinning. Why is that spinning?
What type of wood are you using for the trucks?
I'm using maple, but any type of hardwood will work fine. Okay, what happened is it came out of the key slot here and it was just spinning on me. So first things first, I'm going on the 2 centers. And I'm just going to round it just like I did the jam chuck and the pellet chuck. That's better. Now I do turn at high speeds on smaller projects. This gentleman that brought in the beautiful burl balls there's no way I would turn at high speed on it. But for small stuff, it works very, very well. Use common sense. Okay, this is going to be the first out of 2 tenons. So that'll be my center tenon. Now, the length that I went in for that cut is right at about 1/4 inch. I'm going to do that the same on the second one. And the reason for that is, with the chuck I'm using, and most chucks out there to my knowledge, from the face of the jaws to the inside plate is 1/2 inch. If I go deeper than that with this and I try to use this wooden chuck in there, it's going to hit on the bottom plate. So let's move it over to our 1/8 inch off center and see what it looks like. Now when I go in for this second tenon, I don't go in as far as I did for the first one. I need that step there, and that's where the face of my jaws are going to go up against the shoulder. And I want to make sure that I have enough meat on that tenon for the jaws to grab onto. And we are in good shape. We have a shoulder for the first one, shoulder for the second, and plenty of tenon for the jaws to grab onto. I had the opportunity for 27 years of part of a second career of teaching, and I taught for a total of 27 years to high school students. With that being said, there will be a test after the demonstration. It's a 42 question multiple choice test, no true and false, on all the steps that we did. Okay, again on safety, I'm using a Talon chuck and they have little grub screws. I use these all the time and lock that chuck in so there's no surprises. I was doing a demo the other day and one of the attendees looked at me and says, "Are you doing that just because you're doing a demonstration or do you do that at home too?" I do it at home. Everything that I'm doing here this evening is how I do it at home. Okay, we're going to mount this in the chuck on the first tenon. lot of different styles of box making. Sometimes the pieces have to go on and off the lathe several times. So I get in the habit of, when I put any type of tenon in here, I mark them between the number 1 and 2 jaws, so that I have to put it back in the chuck, I can put it back at the same exact spot. And everything should line up perfectly. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spindle gouge, and I'm going to go ahead and put a bull nose on the front here. I'm checking my height. It's a little tall. That's better. The shape that I'm putting on here, the bull nose, is the same shape as the bottom of the box that we're going to be doing this evening. But I kind of use it as practice cuts. I'm starting with the tip of my tool. As soon as I can, I'm writing the bevel. From the start to the finish of the cut. As I'm writing that bevel, it's actually burnishing the piece of wood. It's got a lot of spalting. It's got some, there we go, it's got a void in it. I'm not sure if that's going to reach into the box itself or not. We'll find out in just a few minutes. But being spalted, it's probably going to need a little extra sanding. What I'm going to do is I'm going to float this between the 2 cups, the cup on the spindle drive and also the cup on the live circuit. See that it's hitting on all 3 corners. Bring my tool rest up. And with the point of my pencil, I'm going to check these 3 points to see if they actually match up. 1, 2, 3. So right now they're matching up. This block is cut, I think it's something like 2.5 inch, but it's a 2.5 inch exact cube is what I'm using to start here for this style box. Because I want to end up with, as close as I can, 3 points on the finished piece of this box. That's what I'm after. No guarantees that's what I'm going to get. Okay, I check again. 1, 2, 3. Still looking good.
Mark, which is the top of the box and which is the bottom?
I don't know. But I will figure it out before 8 o'clock. What time is it? Is it before 8?
Yep.
Yes, it's
Okay,
before.
I figured it out. This is going to be the top of the box. This is going to be the bottom of the box. There's going to be more waste on the bottom end towards the headstock. So what I was doing is I was looking at the character of this piece of wood and where I was going to get the most out of it. And I chose this. Hopefully I'm correct. Also, folks have been asking, how do I get exact cubes? Well, I got lucky. Walmart was having a sale. That feels pretty
Chinese
good.
maple?
Pardon me?
Chinese maple?
You go to aisle 7, about halfway down, the left third shelf up, there's a whole box of them.
They're not special.
My process, there's a couple ways you can go about it. What I do now is I'll rough cut a length of wood, let's say 20 inches, whatever, and rough cut it, let's say 2 5/8 if I wanted to do this size box. Then I would go over to my jointer and I would join 2 sides to get them absolutely 90 degrees. I set the fence up on my bandsaw and I slowly cut off the other 2 sides to 2.5 inches square. So now I got a 2.5 inch square. 2 sides are joined, 2 sides have bandsaw curves on them. I go back to the joiner with the square side up against the fence and the bandsaw curved down. I take 2 cuts. I roll it over, I take 2 cuts. I measure it, I put a square on it, and I've got exactly 2 3/8 of an inch all the way around. Then I set up a miter saw and a jig stop on the miter saw. If it's 2 3/8 all the way around, I set it up for 2 3/8 and make that cut. Then I've got the cube. Okay. Still need that pencil. This being the top of the box towards the sail stock end, I'm going to measure down from each of these 3 corners 3/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to put a little pencil mark there. You're probably saying to yourself,
I am.
what is he doing?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm doing is marking this so I do not go past those pencil lines. The 3 points that I'm after for this box, you would think that they were the ones I was lining up with my pencil, but they're not. The 3 points are going to end up down here around that pencil line, this 3/8 of an inch down. And the reason for that is, over here being a cube, if I use these top points, I'd end up with a flat on 3 sides that I would not be able to turn out to get that spherical shape on the bottom. And I'm hoping that I remember when I start making those cuts to stop and show you those flat spots. And that'll be after I knock off these corners. And if you don't believe me, just trust me for just a few minutes. Okay, first things first, I'm going to start on the top. We're going to do a very shallow concave cut. Move my tool rest so it's about 45 degrees. Make sure nothing touches. I'm going to use a spindle gouge for this. Enter the point of the tool. As soon as I can, I ride that bevel on that cut. I'm only going to go down. I'm going to leave about 3/4 of an inch tenon on here so I have some support for my cuts. The cuts aren't heavy. They're maybe a 1/16 of an inch cut. I'll make one more and we'll stop and take a look at what we got. Just those 4 cuts. You can't see what I'm... That's the only camera, right? Is this one?
Somebody made
Yeah,
the
not
light
close
up,
enough.
that's why.
Okay. Okay, then you can trust me. There's a triangle here now on the top being formed, and I've got a very shallow concave cut. I keep saying the word shallow, and the reason for that is if you go too deep on this, 1, the shape is not going to look right, but number 2, you're not going to have enough wood to do any hollowing to make it a box. There's not going to be enough room in there. So again, shallow here, I'm about halfway to those lines. I'm going to make 3 or 4 more cuts and just stay shy of those pencil lines. But there's a little trick I wanted to share with you. When I get down to really finishing and trying to get to those points, I need to be pretty accurate. I need to know where my tool is. So if you listen as I'm cutting and notice that when I start this cut, I'm going to bring my bevel up to where I've already cut and I'm going to lay it on there. My left hand is over the tool and right up against the tool rest. I'm going to slide that tool out. And when I stop hearing that knocking, I advance that tool about a 1/16 of an inch or 32nd, whatever, and then start making that cut in. So I always know where I am with that tool. I'm not guessing by just jamming the tool in there. So listen to what I'm doing. if you can notice from where you're sitting of how slow I'm going with that tool going in there. There's a reason I'm going extra slow this evening because there's so much spalling here. If I go fast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear some of that grain out and have a lot more sanding to do. Do we have any sanders in here? Anybody like to sand? You probably can't hear me. Does anybody like to sand? You're my kind of people. I don't like to sand either, so if I can get a cleaner cut by taking my time or sharpening that tool, I do that. Yes, I do sand my work, but I try to minimize how much I sand. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. We're going to play around with the bottom here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knock off these points, the back 3 points, and then we're going to come over and knock off the top 3 points. And I'm going to start shaping a little bit of a spherical shape for the bottom of this box. Also keeping in mind that somewhere in here I need to put a tenon on here so I can hold this to hollow it out. Okay, back 3 points. They're gone. Going up to the first 3 points. See that bevel there? I can find out where they are. And one more cut and I'll stop. Hopefully I still have those flat spots on here, and I don't, I got rid of them. But take a look, I'm already down to that 3/8 mark on here. So, you know, we're just barely got rid of them on that last cut. So I got a lot of shaping to do here. As I'm cutting, I'm eyeing up that spherical shape over top of the piece. It's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to start forming a tenon on here. I'm going to start back by the spindle. I'm going to take this down to about 1.25 inches diameter. This is all going to be waste. Now I can start working on the tenon area. I'll stop and take a look and make sure in the tenon area that I have enough solid tenon for my chuck to grab it onto, and we do. There is a lot of spalling in there. Okay, the back is almost done. Now we have to come around to the front and try to match up those 3 points. spindle detail gouge. I did those 2 cuts on my own. I feel as though I've done enough with that. It's not to the point yet. So I'm going to ask for some volunteers to tell me when to stop when I get to that point where we get exactly 3 points. And the gentleman in the gray t-shirt that looks shocked right there, yes, that one. Okay. Would you tell me when I've gone far enough, please? Because you got the perfect seat for this.
You?
Yeah.
I'll try, yeah.
And your name is?
John.
John? Okay. A lot of pressure on John right here. You been with the club long?
About a year.
Do you plan on staying?
Yes.
You better get this right.
Okay. Stop. Stop.
Stop.
Half a cup more.
Half a cup more. Don't say anything about this, man.
Okay. Perfect.
Wrap it up, we'll take it.
You can stay in the club. They are happy with you right now. Okay, so we got the 3 points to match. We got a nice, pleasant shape going here. As that's done, we're going to come back over the backside. We're going to use a thin curve parting tool, and we're going to part this part of the way down. I'm not going to part it off. That's not a safe thing. I brought 4 different parting tools here with me. The first one I used was a 1/4-inch parting tool. Just nothing fancy. Just does a quick job for me. If need be at any time, this is an 1/8 inch. And when I get down to the finial work, I bought a real nice little thin curve parting tool. And this one here I've been using for at least the last 20 years. And if you choose to try one out, there's a couple suggestions that I would like to give you. You can take a note on this. This is important. It's not on my website.
Don't let your wife know you're stealing her butter knives.
We'll get there. We're not starting with the wife yet. Make sure that you find one that's really stiff. Okay? There's a lot of flimsy table knives. They're dangerous. But make sure it's really stiff. They really hold up well. I mean, I used the heck out of this thing. Now, what I did do, and I'm not scared of my wife, she's a sweetheart, but just out of, I guess, fear. At 11 o'clock at night, you know, I said, check this out. So I looked over to make sure she was asleep, and she was. And I walked into the kitchen and very quietly opened a silverware drawer. This is the note here, note 1. Pick the knife that doesn't match the rest. And I took that and very quietly went down to my shop, which at that time was in my basement. I put it next to my grinder. The reason for that is I didn't grind it. The reason for that was if I see it the next day or a month later, I'll know why I have it there. Otherwise, chances are I see so many tips and what have you. If I don't do them right away, I forget about them. I don't know if that happens to you, but yeah, I forget little things. So, you know, that has done me well through the years. And yes, my wife has come to a demonstration of mine once, and actually twice. And she knows about this now, so you cannot blackmail me. Now, I have had the huge opportunity of being invited to a lot of places like this. And people put me up in their homes and they feed me and we have laughs and we do turning. And after a few years, that started to die down just a little bit. And it took a while for me to figure it out. I'm a little slow. But they were in fear of me coming into their homes and taking from their silverware. I'm not a thief. I would never do that. I don't know who started that. But I had to deal with that, and I had to, you know, come up with other ways to do things. So I started eating my meals at Outback. And this is a little bit of a larger thinker parting tool. Very stiff, cuts very well. No, I did not steal it. I asked the waitress what they did with their old knives that were dull. And she says sometimes they end up in the trash. I said, well, any way I can pick up a couple from you? And she brought 2 out to me. And I will never use them up, and I gave her a good tip. But I will never wear these out. I got another one that's a little bit longer than this. So that's what I'm going to use right here to go through this tenon here. This being faulted, I'm going to take it down to about a 1/4 inch diameter. I don't trust taking it any smaller. We can just snap that off.
Mark, when you came down to the 3 points, what happens if you go too far?
After you get done crying, you have a design opportunity to make another style box. I tell folks when I do this for workshops, I give them a choice of making 2, if they want to do rockabouts, I give them a choice of 2 different boxes. One is the traditional rockabye that I showed you a few minutes ago when I started, and another is this. This has 6 points all the way around, and it has a kind of... Did you just tell yourself a joke back there?
Yes, sorry.
He must have just got it. He was laughing to beat the band back there. This is convex instead of concave, but this is done on purpose. This isn't a mistake. But if you have that 3-pointed box that we're making now, and you go past that point, you're going to end up with a flat. Okay? I don't think it looks that pretty on these, but you just have to do something else with it. That's just not come up. It's not going to be a traditional.
Can you change the shape of the bottom to come back and
No.
find those points?
No, you can't. As I say, it's a one-time deal. You got one shot at making those points. And when I ask the attendees in the workshops, especially if there's beginners, you know, I can work with this on the beginners, but I suggest that they do this one because if you make an extra cut, it's not going to hurt a thing. It's just going to mean that point gets a little wider. It's not a big deal. On the 3-point rockabye box, one shot. And not everybody is fortunate enough to have somebody like John on the sidelines telling me when to stop. Thank you, John. Now you want to put that back? Okay. Tighten that on there. I think I already did, but I'm just double checking. I don't want any surprises. We're going to go ahead and put our blank in here. And we need to get rid of this nub and hollow this out. Trying to keep an eye on my watch here so we can have plenty of time to get this done. Back to the Outback parting tool. Notice that I'm parting this off at an angle. I don't want that tool anywhere near those 3 points. All I gotta do is touch it once. And it's gone. Okay, back to the spindle gouge. Take a look at what we got. That's good for right now. To start out with the hollowing, I use a 5/8 Forstner bit and bore this out. Before I put the bit in the chuck, I want to mark it so I know how far to bore this in here. At this point, I don't want to come up with a napkin ring. And I've got a series of marks on here. I've done a lot of boxes with this. So I have picked a line here that I want to come to. Probably going to be about 3/4 of an inch deep, thereabouts. And I have to keep in mind that this has a brad point which sticks out about 1/8 inch. Okay, so you could have a little pinhole in the bottom of your box. If you filled it with something, it would leak. So I incorporate that in my depth. What I'm after in this box is for the bottom to be somewhere around 3/16, even 1/4 inch thick. I'm not going after a thin wall. I don't want somebody to accidentally drop it on the table and have it crack. Hold the chuck. If I find that I haven't drilled deep enough, it's not a big deal. I can take more out of the bottom with my hollowing tool. I just can't put it back. Okay. Now, this is probably the most exciting part of the demonstration, is watching the hollowing. The exciting part about it is you cannot see a thing of what I'm doing. To make it fair, I can't see a thing either. So basically I'm going by feel. But I will go over the steps I use for hollowing. No matter what type of hollowing tool that I'm using, as a rule of thumb, when I put my tool on a tool rest and the handle is parallel with the lathe, I want the top of my cutter to be on the center line. And I can tell right there we're about 1/4 inch low. A little bit more. Still a little bit more. Now the tool I'm using has a carbide cutter on it. The harder the wood is, the more it likes it. This is real soft wood with all this folding in here. But the process that I do, get the center lined up. When I go to start my cut, right now the cutter is straight up and down. I'm going to call that 9 o'clock. What I do when I start is I roll that tool over to about 7:30 on the clock. It will still cut, but not much. As I start cutting, I will roll the handle clockwise to about 8, 1/4 after, somewhere. You'll feel it, you'll hear it where you find that sweet spot. But if I went in here at 90 degrees, oh, it would cut, but it would grab. And I don't know if any of you read in the wood turning books, there's a word they use in there, it's called a catch. Anybody read that? Anybody have one? You've had one?
That catch when I first started doing turning.
I've had plenty of those in the past too. I don't like them. So I'm going to try to avoid that. So anyway, that's how I start. On this box, for the first 1/8 inch going down, I want a straight wall. So I don't start hollowing to about an 1/8 inch in. I'm going to reach in as far as I can with the cutter in the straight position. And I also have to keep the shavings cleaned out. So I brought with me a portable compressor. It has 2 modes. One is the exhale mode, and the other is the inhale mode. I'm going to demonstrate, hopefully, the exhale mode on getting those shavings out. And I'm not going to be aggressive, just going to let the tool do the work. And I'm already down the bottom, but I have to take a little bit of the bottom out because of that dimple that was made by the drill bit, point of the drill bit. Clean out those shavings. Still got a little dimple, not much, so I go a little bit deeper. About as far as I can reach in with a straight tool. So I'm going to adjust this and just turn this cutter head so I can reach inside a little bit further and clean out the shavings. Now I can reach back in a little bit further. It doesn't take long for those shavings to build up. Stop off and clean them out because they can help you have a catch once it gets all bound up in there. Yeah, I'm in there about a 1/2 inch. Not bad. I'm going to come out a little bit further. On these small hollow forms, I do not sand the inside. I just try to get a clean cut with the cutter. Most of the wood turning groups that I go to, nobody would ever put their finger in there to feel the quality of the cut at the inside. Okay, I'm back as far as I'm going to go this evening, but I want to put this back into the straight cutting position so that I can make that transition and just clean it up just a little bit. And we could be done with the hollowing. Okay, we're going right down to the bottom. Again, I'm just trying to feel it as I'm cutting along here. If I wanted to and I wasn't happy with the hollowing and I went ahead and finished the box, I can go back in and hollow later. I can just put it on a vacuum truck. Hopefully that should have it. Now I can take a look in there. One tiny little hump right in the center. If you start seeing silver coming out on the bottom, you know you went too far. Okay, I want to call that good. Done with that. Before I take that off the chuck, on the hole that I drilled with the 5/8 Fosner bit, I'm not trusting that that was going to run exactly true. So I'm going to use a 1/4-inch spindle skew. And I'm just going to go in with my long point, take off a very little bit. And the reason I use a round skew is the back of the round is actually my bevel. And it's going to burnish the inside of this lid area. On the very inside, I'm just going to chamfer that, just so it's not sharp in case somebody did put their finger in. Okay, looks good. Okay, as far as sanding with the lathe running, you can sand a little bit of this. If the only part that I can sand while it's running is right where the solid wood is. Don't come out to the points. My finished boxes are sanded up to 600 grit. So I've got 150 if I need it, 220, 320, 400, and 600. But all the boxes are sanded by hand off the lathe. And I'll rough sand them with 1 grit, which is, this one here is a wore out 150 piece. And I'll do that to the top, also the sides. Eventually, I'll get rid of those pencil lines that I put on there. And at this point, if one of your points is off a very little bit, you can do a little creative sanding to where you won't notice. But if it's a 16th or an 1/8 inch off, you're not going to get it. You're going to see that that box does not look right. So I want you to pretend for me, if you will, that I've already sanded everything to 600 grit. Okay, it's perfectly sanded. Now we'll get back to the jam check. Okay, measure the opening with your calipers. As a rule of thumb, I usually make the calipers just a little bit larger than what I need so I can sneak up on a tight fit for this jam chuck. Okay, that should be a little larger than what I need. So I'm going to slightly taper it so I can sneak up on the fit that I want. I'm going to make a little convex cut here for where the box is going to sit. Just barely starting. Well, I want for this face here to sit up against this shoulder here that I've created. That's what I'm after here. And it does. And we got a nice tight fit there. If you wanted to beef up that fit, then you can also use a little bit of tongue oil on the tendon here, which will raise the fibers. And you'll have a little bit better grip, because you only got about an 1/8 inch here as far as depth. So let's put some tongue oil on there. That's gonna hold now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off that little nub there. And I did that so I can set up my tailstock to hold pressure on this piece while I'm roughing in the final shape. I use a golf ball over this so I don't have to deal with the point, or my tool doesn't get anywhere close to the live center. Okay. Set up roughly 45 degrees. Back to the spindle gouge. Just getting rid of some waste here so I have room to get my tool in here. Shape is looking pretty good. I'm working on a finished cut there, so sanding is not too much. Okay, that's looking pretty good. There you can see the advantages of using quality tung oil. Speed down for sanding. Again, the only sanding that I do is on the solid part. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the crispness of all the corners that I worked to get. Well, last night I had turned one of these up for the Bucks County wood turners, and it had a little bit of burl in it and a little bit of spalt in it. Everything looked good, but when I took it off the lathe and I put it on the lathe bed to see how it rocked, I noticed that it leaned to one side. Well, the spalting area weighed a lot less than the burl area, so it was just off balance. If that's the case with one of these boxes, no problem. You just have to do a little creative sanding to get it to where you want it to be. And this one here, if you can trust John over there, it is absolutely perfect.
I can't even see it from here.
Huh?
I can't see it from here.
That's about now.
Spot on.
Here, check it out. Just kidding. Now, I have my calipers here, and that is exactly a 1/4 inch. So we're in good shape. You believe me, right? Good. Okay, so everything's done with this right now except for finish sanding. But we need a lid, we need a finial. Jam chuck, I'll save for later and use it for something else. The reason for that was Matt has been, I don't know, he must have been the lowest one on the totem pole. I've been staying with him for a few days and he's been hauling me around to all these demonstrations. So he can probably do this demo in his sleep now. But anyway, the last 2 boxes I did, when I did the lid, there was a little crack in the piece. And when I got to the size I wanted, just cleaned everything up. Both lids had the crack at the same spot. So I just had to make the lids just a little bit smaller. And I had enough lumber left in that piece to make probably another 4 lids. But I wised up today when I got this material together this morning for coming over here, get another piece of blackwood, so I didn't run into that problem tonight. No guarantees, there's no cracks in this one, but we'll see. All right. I need to measure that opening again. Now my lid tenon on here is going to be a little smaller bend this opening. I'm done with the golf ball. The guy at one of the meetings I was at asked me after I put the golf ball in the live center, he says, "Does that affect your putting at all?" Real wise guy. I said, "No, I got a hole in one." Make sure that's in there. I'm just going to turn this into a cylinder. Okay, on this end here, I'm going to first true it up. Now I'm going to start the tenon. I don't like the sound of that. Hear that? Yeah. Listen. If something doesn't sound right, check it out. Make sure nothing is going wrong. It's tight in there, and I cannot see a crack. We'll continue on. Okay, there's the actual diameter. And we want to make it just a little smaller so that we can get that tick-tock out of it. Okay, before I finalize the tenon, I will check and make sure the lid is loose enough. We're good there. Before I take it off, I'm going to go ahead and make a little concave cut. I'm rolling my spindle gouge up on the side, just doing a shear cut. If you're overly excited about sanding, you can sand that. And rounded off those corners. At the point of the skew, I'm just going to put a couple detail cuts in here. Now with the thin curve parting tool, I want to cut this off, and while cutting it off, I want to keep in mind that I want a dome type lid on here, so I'm going to start forming that with the parting tool, so I have less work to do when I reverse turn this. feel in this piece of wood. Okay, grab onto it while you part it off. I'm not real sure, but there's no checks or anything in there that I can see. So, we're going to reverse turn this, and we're going to use the collet that we made up earlier. As I put this on the tenon and tighten it up, I just snug it up. Don't kill it. Not a whole lot of pressure, just enough to hold it in there.
Excuse me, I noticed when you passed that around, there was a slot cut in it. Did you explain what the slot was for?
The slot is, and you're going to see in just a second, as I'm going to turn a recess in here for the tenon that I just turned here, and it's going to slip in, and then when I tighten these jaws, it's going to act like a collet shut and clamp onto my tenon. That's my intention. Now, I do that on a table saw on a long block of wood, but if you only wanted to make one or two real quick, just a couple bandsaw curves are fine. It's just when you put the curves in, make sure you don't go all the way to the center of your blank so you have some place to put your live center point. Okay, so I need to measure this exactly. With one leg of the calipers, I'm just going to mark this inset. That's it. Should be good. With the long point of the round skew, I'm just going to hollow this out. With the skew, I want to go straight in because I want to try to get a good clamp on that tenon. There's nothing wrong with stopping your lathe and checking your progress. It's just barely starting. Much easier to take off wood than it is to put it on, so it's worth stopping and checking. Now I cut these off in slices off a long block of wood, and I do that on the bandsaw. So this face is not true. So while I'm here, I'm just going to screw up the face, so that when I put this piece in, the lid will sit nice and true. Let's check and see if we got a fit here. Okay, it goes in, just slid right in there. So it's a little loose. We tighten and compress that saw curve area. It grips onto that tenon, and that should not go anywhere.
No tongue oil?
No tongue oil on this one, no. If I used tongue oil twice on a box, I'd have to charge more. as it is, you can see the steps in these things. It's actually quite time consuming, but I think well worth it in the end. With the skew, I'm going to come across, I'm going to hold the skew at about 45 degrees, and I'm just going to shear cut this. Most of the work I did prior with the parting tool as I was parting it off, as far as the shaping, the dome shape. With the long point of the skew, I'm going to mark center and put a little dimple. And this is where we're going to drill an 1/8 inch hole for our finial. I'm going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit and estimate about an 1/8 inch deep. There is a possibility that you can go all the way through, but there should be enough material in there to easily get an 1/8 inch hole so we can make an 1/8 inch long tenon. That should work fine. We'll take a look at it before sanding. I think I need to make another cut here. I'm sure hoping that's a dancing flash up there. One more cut. I'm just going to hit this with a piece of 600 grit. How are we doing so far? Are there any questions that I can answer? Everybody ready? Okay, so I think we're in good shape there. With that, we can take that off. So the box is complete, the lid is complete. The lid is really thin, kind of hard to pick up. So we're going to make a little finial for it. Alright, so we're going to use a piece of contrasting wood. I brought some boxwood with me for this evening. Let's see. So we got Norwegian maple spalted burl and blackwood and boxwood. I'm just putting it here in the chuck just so I can put a quick tenon on here for our eccentric chuck. I'll set my calibers for a 1/2 inch. And with the parting tool, we'll start creating a tenon. to go about a ½ inch in towards the chuck. That should give me plenty of holding power on the eccentric chuck. Probably going to be tight, but that's okay. We can always take a little more off. So we want to sneak up on that fit. If I make that tenon too big, what's going to happen when I put it in this eccentric chuck, it's going to split it. Trust that that's going to do it for us. Okay, I'm going to put it on the eccentric, the off-center tenon first. And I'm going to make 2 cuts that I had to practice, and I think we all practiced in the very beginning of wood turning. That is coves and beads and coves. I'm going to turn half a cove and then half a bead on this finial. I'm going to tap that in till it shoulders out on that flat spot. With that shoulder, we have support for our cut. Before I start cutting, I want to find out where my new center is. I know you can't see it from where you're sitting on the TV, but I'm just barely on the edge of this. So I have just a little bit of meat there to play with. With the rough and gouge, I'm going to do half a cove. As I get smaller, I'm going to have to wrap my finger around the back of this for support. I'm going to try to go down to about a 1/16 of an inch. Still using the anchor bevel cut. it down to about an eighth. A little bit more. To me right now it's just a little thick and proportion doesn't work. Fine. That's our half a co. Now we're going to go for a half a bead. So I'm going to switch it. To the first tenon, which was everything was running center. Looks like I got about 4 minutes to finish this. To keep my word. Should be able to see the shape starting to form on the string. What I stopped to look at was the diameter of the base. I wanted to make sure it was small enough to fit the dimensions I have on the box. And that is, as soon as it stops, that is this diameter here. I didn't want this to look too big on there. It should be fine. Okay, now we need to create an 1/8 inch tenon on here. So the hole we drilled in the lid length. I'm just roughing some of the stock out of the way. We'll switch over to our table knife. Set the calipers up for the hole that we drilled. The length of this should be about an 1/8 inch. Okay, it's almost done. We need to add a little bit of photography work to this.
Happy birthday to you.
I hope my wish comes true. And Marty, I tried. I think we got it. early enough for the rest.
Got it.
Folks, there is the Rockabye box and all the steps. I'd like to thank the DelVal group for inviting me up here. It's been a pleasure to turn for you, and I hope you all try one of these. Okay, thank you very much.